presidency of Mohammed Morsi of Egypt, his overthrow, and some of the implications for the Middle East. And Dr. LMadu, let's pick up where we left off before we had our first commercial break and continue our discussion in reference to some of the problems that President Morsi created in a real sense, as you've indicated during the first segment, for himself in reference to his presidency.
And then, you know, fifth, like I said before, his regime was a kind of catalyst for religious intolerance. You know, Muslims fighting Christians, Christians fighting Muslims, and then the army wants stability, you know, not chaos. And the Muslim Brotherhood were taunting Christians, you know, and Christians start feeling that, hey, what happened in Iraq is going to happen to us. Because after the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, almost all the Christians in Iraq have been driven away. When Saddam Hussein was there, Iraq was a secular, strong secular state. You know, he didn't tolerate any kind of religious disturbances. Now they've driven them out. So the Christians in Iraq felt that with the Muslim Brotherhood in power and the way they were behaving and what they were saying, it will be a matter of time before they are driven out of Egypt. And they were willing to stand up and fight for it. And the army knew there, you know, there would be a problem if there was instability in the country. The United States is not going to stand by and watch Christians being slaughtered in Egypt. Now it's going to cost them some. What is that? The army gets $1.5 billion from the United States every year. And so if Morsi's regime start going the way the U.S. government does not like, then the army will lose that money. And they are not willing to lose that kind of money, because the army itself is a corporation in Egypt. They run a whole lot of things, you see. So they started seeing that Morsi was moving the way they don't want. Now, Morsi wants to gradually build a theocratic state in Egypt.
Just like Iran or something.
Okay, just like Iran or Saudi Arabia, okay? Because the policy, the principles of Hassan al-Banna, who was the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, is an eventual theocratic state in Egypt, an Islamic state in Egypt. Now, there's a difference between an Islamic nation and an Islamic state, just like a Christian nation and a Christian state. Egypt is already an Islamic nation, just like Jordan, you know, and Syria and all this. But they don't want Islamic state. You know, an Islamic state is one that its laws and everything is governed by the Quran. The Quran is the constitution, like you have in Iran now, and you have in Saudi Arabia, you know. Now, the government of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt antagonized the other moderate, you know, governments in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates. Now, Saudi Arabia being the center of Islam doesn't mind a theocratic state in Egypt, but not one under the Muslim Brotherhood, because they see the Muslim Brotherhood as a subversive organization that if they entrench themselves in Egypt, they will start plotting to overthrow the Saudi monarchy, okay, and impose a radical Islamic state, not a moderate one like we have in Saudi Arabia. Okay. So that's very important. So what happened? In order to create problems for Mohammed Morsi that will really make people start agitating, they withdrew money they normally gave Egypt to balance its budget. Saudi Arabia stopped, you know, funding.
So this was a real source of support for the Egyptian government.
Oh, yes.
And now, all of a sudden, so it really started with Saudi Arabia in a real sense. Is that what we're saying?
That's correct. Saudi Arabia stopped funding. They normally gave about $8 billion or so. Now they've said they will start giving the money again. Kuwait withdrew. United Arab Emirates withdrew. That's about $12 billion right there that they've said now they were going to give because of the new change in regime. So they were scared of the Muslim Brotherhood, because for long, like I said, the Brotherhood had been seen in most Arab governments as a subversive engine, like, you know, Syria, what happened before. And they have their tentacles everywhere. So that was what was, you know, frightening to these moderate Arab governments. Like I said before, when Egypt, you know, sneezes, there's cough in other Arab capitals. So what is happening in Cairo is of importance to these other neighboring states. So the Egyptian army, you know, was not willing to have a theocratic state, an Islamic state in Egypt anytime soon. Because already people are already getting scared. Investors weren't investing because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, whether there's going to be riots or strikes or whatever, so they're keeping their money away. Tourists are scared because they've heard of, the Christian Muslim riots everywhere. So that's draining the economy. So that was taxing the patience of everybody in Egypt, apart from the Brotherhood themselves, who really knew what they wanted, is to gradually seize power in Egypt and become the sole political party, and there will be no more elections. If you want to participate, you're either a Muslim Brotherhood member or you're out, just like Iran. If you want to run for office now, you got to be part of the Muslim ruling class. Otherwise, you won't be able to run. So Egyptians don't want that. They want a secular, democratic state, even though they're an Islamic nation, because the most important center of learning of Islam in the world is in Egypt, the Al-Azhar University in Cairo. So they have enough of that, but they do not want a government, that would ask women what to wear and what
the Quran in reference to all of their activities.
Exactly, because now what will happen if you have an Islamic state in Egypt? All the Christians are going to run away, period, because that will force them to follow that rule. Moreover, most of the businesses we call Western style businesses, liquor stores and all this, are run by Christians. All those will be shut down. That's what happened in Iraq. Okay, so that would be a big blow to the Egyptian economy. And the army was watching all this nervously. And if that kind of thing start happening, the United States and Britain and France, West Germany, all this will withdraw, their economic assistance to Egypt, as well as Saudi Arabia, because they will feel threatened themselves. That is what has happened. And then you throw in the Sunni Shiite, problem in the mix. Then you have a combustible, environment there.
And so the Egyptian president just created a lot of problems for himself, and now it's a situation where he's no longer there. And I guess when we come back during this final segment, we'll find out exactly what are the prospects in terms of getting out of the box that he has found himself in. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.